And when I say it took me by surprise down there in the title, I mean it took me by so much of a surprise that I didn't even know it existed until like 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So completely unknown to me, Bernie Burns returned to Rooster Teeth like a year ago to write RVB Restoration, Season 19. It's meant to be this nice, just sweet little ending, just a better bow to leave the series on than,
Red vs. Blue 0.
Yeah, 0 was complete trash. But Season 19, Restoration, on the other hand, it's got some problems, you know, it's not perfect, but you can definitely tell that this season was written by Bernie and had major influence from the rest of the original cast. So today we're doing a formally informal review of Red vs. Blue Season 19, Restoration. So let's start off with the plot. I'm gonna give you a brief summary of the plot and then I'll give my review at the end, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Restoration actually removes seasons 15 to 17 from its continuity. As far as we're concerned, Restoration takes place like, I don't know, maybe like a year after the Chorus trilogy. The only thing it sort of like keeps from that whole continuity is Washington's injury, but it makes some slight changes to it, so we're gonna get to that in a bit. In those moments before he died, Church left a bunch of contingency recordings for the Reds and Blues in case anything ever went south with his plan to delete himself and turn himself into the fragments again. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happens. Tucker, wearing the Meta's armor, starts to go insane as the computer fragments that Epsilon left behind start to go insane and completely take him over. Yep, that's right, the Meta is once again the main antagonist because he's everybody's favorite. So Tucker, being the husk of the Meta, is forced by Sigma and the other AIs to try and locate Epsilon. They're working on Instinct to try and restore the Alpha, and if they're successful in restoring the Alpha, this version of him will be completely unpredictable and will essentially be a huge threat. Also, remember that prophecy back from, what was it, season 3 or 4, where it was prophesized that the whole Great Destroyer prophecy? Well, it turns out it was actually Tucker who was the Great Destroyer. I mean, he did pick up the sword. Makes sense. So after Lopez finds the recordings in Caboose's helmet, the Reds and Blues are once again, Reds and Blue, singular. The Reds and Blue are forced to work together to try and stop the Meta. Church instructs the Reds and Blue to go to the old Charon Industries flagship to retrieve the capture unit that Wash and Meta used to capture Tex. Church's plan is to essentially draw out the Meta and use the capture unit to draw out all the AI from the Meta suit. And, you know, hopefully save Tucker. The Reds are initially like, this is Blue Team business, it's not our problem, but eventually they do come around because they've been through a lot together. They can't just leave Caboose to die. So the Reds and Caboose get a lift from 479er from back in Project Freelancer. Remember her? She was the cool pilot.
Okay, you can stop talking. That immediately sounds like something stupid.
Okay, yeah, well, I never liked you either.
Yeah, I know, she was kind of a bitch. But they head to the Charon Industries flagship and work their way through the intense and super high maximized security. Except that's not at all what happens. Turns out even security guards are doing remote work now. So they get to the old trophy room where they had their big fight and they find both the Meta armor, the capture unit, and wait a second. I thought Tucker had the Meta armor.
I should probably warn you that if you're gonna run into the Meta anywhere, that's where he's most likely to be.
Yeah, really good timing, Church. So yeah, of course the Meta would ambush them in the Charon Industries flagship. It's the one place where the Reds and Blues can get the thing they need to stop him, so best place to ambush them. But they're getting the crap kicked out of them, and the Reds decide, you know what? Let's get out of here before we get killed. That he can have Caboose. It's totally fine. He's a Blue. Who cares? As the old saying goes,
suck it, Blue.
But as they're all getting on the Pelican and getting ready to go and making final preparations for takeoff, Sarge is like, we can't just abandon Caboose. Like, that wouldn't be right. So Sarge goes back, pulls a funny with the bubble shield, and gets Caboose aboard the Pelican. But before they can take off, the Meta, using Tucker's sword, stabs Sarge through the chest, through the door. And then we get this really touching scene, which honestly really got me. Sarge's death was like, oh man, they did it. It was really good. It was like really heartwarming. I actually cried a little bit the first time I watched it, especially when Sarge gave Simmons his shotgun. Oh my god, that was so tear-jerking. Oh my goodness. And then everybody's back in Blood Gulch, and Griff and Simmons have buried Sarge, and of course Simmons, knowing how much Sarge was, well, Sarge, Simmons added this funny little button that plays vaguely southern insults when you press it onto Sarge's grave, which is just so very Sarge.
Hey, numbnuts, you call that grief? Drop and give me 40 boo-hoos!
And while all this is happening, back on Chorus, Washington is still struggling with his injury, but at least he has Doc to talk to. And then as Wash is going for a small stroll, he sees the reports that an unidentified attacker, the Meta, showed up to a convention and started wreaking havoc. So Wash has a bit of a freak out, a bit of a panic attack, and he's kind of subdued and brought back to his room. Luckily, Doc, with the absolute perfect disguise, I approve, helps Wash break out and make it to Blood Gulch. And speaking of Blood Gulch, as the new leader of Blood Gulch Outpost number 1, Simmons makes it his official first order that Griff is to be discharged from the army. And even though Griff really wants to leave, he's like, you know what? I'll stay behind, just for old time's sake. Over in Blue Base, Church's recordings reveal that there is one extra robotic body left in Blood Gulch, and Church then instructs Caboose on, quote-unquote, how to bring him back. Yes, we're reviving Church one more time. And pretty much all that entails is sitting around a campfire and telling some heartwarming stories about all their adventures together. So we get this nice little montage of Caboose, Simmons, and Griff having this nice little sit down where they reminisce on all their things, especially the classic, "Oh, protect me, Cone." Oh, I love this scene. It's a really heartwarming scene. Then, of course, the next day, the meta shows up, and, well, it seems like it's pretty much over. But as Simmons and Griff are getting the shit kicked out of them, Caboose finally finishes his little project and revives Church. Yes, it's Church he revived, yes. When in actuality, Caboose did the big brain and didn't revive Church. He brought back something.
I brought back something way worse.
Caboose decided to revive Tex instead of Church, solely because
I wanted to win.
Gotta say, Caboose, that's probably the smartest thing you've ever done. But it's still the meta, and Tex is just one person, and it's not like Griff and Simmons and Caboose are gonna be much help. So Wash, now in Blood Gulch, is like, crap, I gotta do something. I'm not really good for fighting right now, but I can do something. So Wash, yeets himself off a cliff to activate his recovery beacon so Carolina can come find him. And then, in an ironic parallel, Carolina shows up in a very similar, if not identical, drop pod that Maine showed up in what was it, season 10? So, between Tex, Carolina, and an amazing throw by Simmons,
That is the best throw ever of all time.
they managed to take down the meta, remove all the AI from the suit, and get Tucker out of that goddamn armor. Unfortunately, since Tex is technically an AI, she's also sucked into the recovery unit, but it's okay. Tucker's okay, Caboose destroys the memory unit to ensure the cycle doesn't start again, and Griff heads off back to Earth, and that's it. That's RVB restoration. I think bringing back the meta is like fine because it's the meta. Everybody loves the meta. Also, I find it really interesting how Tucker is kind of like this shell that's just sort of like being forced to embody the meta. And there were one or two scenes where the AI were essentially torturing Tucker to make him do what they want, which was like really messed up, but like, goddamn, poor Tucker, man. He's been through enough. And it's revealed at the very end, after everyone's all well and good, is that Doc is actually dead. Doc died saving Wash on the field, and he didn't make it out of the final battle of Chorus. But due to the nature of Wash's injury, he tends to hallucinate a little bit. So all this time we've been seeing Doc, he wasn't actually there. And then the memory of all the freelancers show up, even getting the original voice actor for North, which was just so good. Like, my heart skipped a beat when that happened. And they all tell him that he doesn't have to completely let go of his memory of Doc, or just Doc in general. Just keep the good parts with him and learn from their mistakes. Overall, I think the plot like finds its footing and starts to feel a lot more like tonally consistent right after Sarge dies. Like, I feel like Sarge's death marks the point during the whole season where it just starts to feel a lot more tonally consistent and just like have proper direction. Because the first half of the plot and the first half of the whole season in general feels kind of like messy and goofy a little bit. I mean, it's red versus blue. It's going to be messy and goofy no matter which way you spin it, but it feels like, it still feels really off. But it feels like the minute Sarge dies, the tone of the entire season and the direction of the entire season feels extremely consistent, and like there is a consistent like path forward. I think the plot's fine. Like, it's not horrible. It's not terrible. It doesn't have any major holes in it or anything. It's just, you know, it's all right. So I'm going to give the plot like a, I don't know, like a 3 out of 5. Now let's talk about something that's very important to the red versus blue universe. Humor. There's a lot of callbacks and a lot of references to like recurring jokes, like Griff being in charge of ammunition, and I like that they keep those running because those consistently reoccurring gags are like very important to the series. Also, Griff makes a meta joke about how they're all in some sort of game and they're just playing over and over again. Like, there's got to be some fourth wall breaking stuff. Sarge did that back in the Chorus trilogy. May as well throw that back in there. In the scene where Epsilon was explaining the whole deal with like the new meta, if you will, sort of explaining what he is and whatnot, there's a lot of gags about the modern internet, which I really appreciated. For example, Church says something along the lines of like, I know people can't pay attention without moving pictures and stuff, so I put together this little video for all of you. Little like stab at like, you know, oh, attention spans, they're down there. Blame TikTok. There's also a gag where Church has like an apology video, which is just complete gold, and then he asks everybody to like and subscribe at the very end. And then Griff and Sarge make some remarks about the thumbnail and the ending. It was really good. It was nice. It felt like an homage to like the entirety of YouTube. I think the humor's pretty all right. It feels very like Red versus Blue. You can tell that Bernie was definitely behind the writing of a lot of the humor, because it feels very in line with like most, like the original Red versus Blue, season 1 to 13. So I'd say the humor's pretty all right. I'll give the humor a 3.5 out of 5. Next part of the review is going to be characters. What I really like about Restoration, something I really like about Red vs. Blue Restoration, is the emphasis on Griff and Simmons. They're the first two characters we're introduced to in the entire series, and it makes sense that this little nice bow they're wrapping up to end out the series, it makes sense that Griff and Simmons would be a huge focus. And something I especially like about Simmons is the way he describes why Sarge did what he did that ended up getting him killed.
I think in the end he realized it didn't matter if he was red or blue. He saw someone in trouble and he helped. When
Simmons explained that to Griff and said, that's what I'm gonna try and do, that really felt where like Simmons's character arc was finally completed. That is where it felt like Simmons is now a complete character and it's time for him to kick ass. And Sarge in general just felt like good old Sarge. Like, I really don't have any qualms with Sarge. I think he was perfectly fine in this season. And I like that the way Sarge is convinced to go fight the meta when Simmons is like, maybe we should help them. I like the way that he's convinced is, hey, we'll have the chance to kill the strongest soldier in the galaxy, which would then make you the strongest soldier in the galaxy. I like that that is how Sarge is convinced. Like, that is a perfect motivation for Sarge. But obviously, Sarge would help anyway, because he's just a good guy. And that's further proven as Sarge spends some of his final breaths saying how he was always hard on Griff and was always just so mean and horrible to him because he knew Griff could be better. He knew Griff was always selling himself short and could be a little bit better if he tried. Because Sarge never did give up on Griff. He had so many opportunities to just shoot him or leave him behind or whatever, and he never did. And Griff acknowledges how horrible Sarge was to him during their service together, but he also acknowledges that Griff himself is probably better because of it. And that's where it felt like Griff's character arc also ended. It feels like that funeral scene where they're in front of Sarge's grave is where Griff and Simmons finally completed their character arcs. It was a really good scene. Now let's talk about Caboose. Caboose, of course, in this classic Caboose fashion, wants to bring back church. Very Caboose. And it feels like Caboose is a lot more like mature and like sort of understands the ramifications of things and just generally is prepared to do whatever he has to stop the meta. In his own Caboose way, of course. But, you know, he's not being just like overly stupid and overly childish all the time, you know? He's actually like taking things seriously and listening to church and, you know, sort of doing what needs to be done. I also really like that Caboose brought back Tex instead of church. I've already said this, but I think that might have been one of the smartest things Caboose has ever done. And by bringing back Tex, Caboose also let Tex get closure with both Carolina, her daughter, Tex Jr., but also let Tex get closure with Church, in some sense anyway. And it felt like Caboose completed his journey when he said this.
You did the right thing, Caboose.
I know. The right part is the part that is the sad part.
I couldn't have phrased it better myself, Caboose. That is the truth. And our last character of significant importance is, of course, Agent Washington. I will say I do like that Bernie and the writers and everybody in general liked to keep the plotline of Wash getting injured. I honestly thought Wash getting injured was a really good plotline in season 15. I also really like the little nod to Wash's cat Loki that, you know, he told us about in, what was it, season 16, I think? I like that they kept that in. Like, I think that was a good inclusion. And the first time I watched Restoration, I didn't really understand that Doc was dead until the very end. Like, I didn't pick up on any of the hints, but there's quite a few hints to show that, like, yeah, Doc's not actually there. For example, Doc doesn't have a reflection, and also, what was it? Nurse, or Dr. Gray, that's her name. In the scene with Dr. Gray, anytime Dr. Gray would talk and then turn back to Wash, Doc wouldn't be there. Like, I think that only happened once, but I'm pretty sure that was on purpose. And there's just little subtleties like that throughout the season that sort of indicate like, oh, is Doc actually there? You know, is he there? They are extremely subtle. I will say that the hints are very, very subtle, and I think that's kind of the point, but I think they might have been a little bit too subtle for some people to pick up on. But either way, I liked that reveal. I like the idea that Doc died saving Wash, and that Wash was sort of grappling with this guilt, you know, throughout the whole season, and then Wash and the memory of the freelancers convinced him, like, you know, you don't have to let go, but don't cling to your guilt. And overall, you know, I thought Wash was fine. I was a little sad we didn't get to see him fight, but we did get a little homage to him fighting when Tex whipped out the 50 cal and shot the meta with with it, just like how Wash did back in season 6. Overall, I'd say the characters are probably still the best part of the entire show. Like, you could pretty much put them in any, well, it's been proven if you put them in any situation, then it might not necessarily be a recipe for success. Looking at you, RVB0. I guess I should rephrase it and say, like, if Bernie put them into any situation, then it's a recipe for success. But no, overall, I think the characters were totally fine. I didn't really have any major issues with them. And I like that they had most of the original cast. So for the characters, character development, and general just vibe of the characters, I'm actually gonna give it a 4 out of 5. And speaking of the characters and the cast, let us talk about our next category, the voice acting. I know anybody who's watched the season has probably been waiting for this moment, but it's time to talk about Caboose's new voice actor. I'm kind of both minds about Caboose's new VA. I am also sad that they couldn't have Joel voice Caboose, but at the same time, I think the new VA did just fine. Like, the character, the way he was written, and the general cadence of his voice, it still felt like Caboose. Would I have liked it to be Joel? Yes. Am I sad that it's not and am okay with how it is? Also yes. But they did manage to get the original voice actor for Tex, Kathleen, I forget her last name, I'll have it on screen right now. I am really glad they got her back. Even if it was just for a couple lines, it really adds that extra layer of authenticity to this season. And Griff, Simmons, Sarge, and Tucker were all just fine. Voice acting, 3.5 out of 5. Now let's talk a little bit about the pacing. I will say this, the pacing isn't fantastic. As I said earlier, the first half of the season feels kind of messy, and it feels like some things happen faster than others and other things slower than others. Like that opening convention scene, I was not a big fan of that. Like, it might have been better if they just showed news reports of an unidentified attacker, then maybe showed the guys, like maybe just like Griff out, you know, shopping or whatever, and then another attack happened and Griff saw it and it was like, oh my god, that's the meta, and then went and reported back to the guys or something like that. It goes from really, really fast at the very start, and then it gets really like kind of slow when we get to blue and red base and Epsilon's explanation and everything. I mean, those scenes are good because just the reds and blues being the reds and blues, but it still feels really slow. Like that promo video that Epsilon made to explain what the hell is going on also kind of dragged on for just a little bit, but I'm willing to forgive it because of the funny gags and nods to the modern internet. Then they get on the transport and go to the Charon flagship, well, former Charon Industries flagship, and it starts to feel a little bit better. Like, you know, they're making headway through the thing, but the whole video call with the remote security soldiers, I feel like that bit kind of goes on for like an extra minute or two longer than it needs to. Like, I feel like that screen time better could have been spent elsewhere. I think the gag itself is fine. Like, I think that as a joke is like totally fine, but I feel like they linger on it for just a little bit too much. When the meta shows up and starts wreaking havoc, it feels like fine. The action, the pacing of the action and the sequencing is totally fine. And then, like I said, once Sarge dies, like after Sarge's death, the pacing feels like actually pretty good. It's like, oh, we just lost someone really important to all of us, someone who's been with us since the beginning, and we're all just kind of wallowing in the somber before the storm. But then, you know, they get cheery and they get lifted and they have this nice sit around the campfire and reminisce on all their good times. Then the meta shows up, the final battle begins, and the rest is history. But yeah, due to the first half of the season being like really like kind of sloppy, and well, maybe not sloppy, but messy in terms of its pacing, I'm gonna give the pacing like a 2.5 out of 5. And another very important RVB aspect that we should talk about is, of course, the fights. I think the quality of animation is fine. Like, you know, the characters don't look like out of place. Like, they look like they're fine in the environment. Like, the contrast between the animated characters and the environment's totally fine. But the fights did feel kind of like, you know, a little janky, a little clunky maybe, a little bit you know. But I think they matched the music and the beats of the music to the fights pretty well. Like, that's something RVB's always been really good at, is matching music to the beats of the fight, and I think they replicated that perfectly fine in this season. And I like Sarge's big brain move of using the old bubble shield to trap the meta against the ceiling. I thought that was just really smart. But overall, the fights are like, they're fine. You know, they're a little bit like, at points. They're a little bit like, it's a little weird, or, you know, it's a little bit like, I don't know if that would happen, but they're okay. So I'm gonna give the fights like another 2.5 out of 5. And now allow me to rate the final thing, which I think deserves its own category, the ending. Griff and Simmons once again contemplate why they're there and if they figured out why they're there. Neither of them have figured it out, but they both agree that they're glad it was with one another and all the other reds and blues. Simmons' final words on screen is "Goodbye, Griff," which I think is very Simmons. One thing I don't like, however, about the ending, it's very small, and like, I'm willing to let it slide because the rest of the ending is fine, is that the transport that came to pick Griff up and bring him back to Earth is one of the characters from RVB 0. which I really didn't like. Like, did you have to acknowledge its existence? You really didn't have to do that. I would have been so much more forgiving with some of my scores if you hadn't acknowledged RVB 0. But it's fine, whatever, who cares? Maybe they did that just so people like me could meme on it. And I like that the final conversation of the entire series is Griff and Caboose talking about, you know, their whole time during war and how Caboose was like, you know, don't worry about it. It's all cool. It's all cool. You guys weren't very good at fighting anyway. And then Griff rounds out the entire series with,
No. No, I don't suppose we were.
and I think that's a really good ending line. I also really like that Simmons stays behind at Blood Gulch Outpost number 1 because that's where he met Sarge and that's where Sarge was stationed, and as the new officer of the Red Team, it's his duty to stay there. Overall, honestly, pretty solid ending. I'm gonna give it like a 3.75 out of 5. So to round up my thoughts in one complete package, have a nice closing statement to describe how I feel about RVB Season 19 Restoration, I'd say it isn't perfect, but goddamn, it is drenched in sincerity. With Bernie at the helm again, you can really tell he wanted to give the most decent send-off he could. And yeah, maybe it was a little rushed, and maybe it was a little, like, not exactly how he might have wanted it to be, but I think it gets the point across pretty well. So my final score for RVB Season 19 Restoration is going to be a very solid 3.5 out of 5. The characters were good. I think the music was perfectly fine. The fights were, you know, like, whatever, but the music kind of carries in those fights anyway. The character development is simplistic and good, and it's just overall a decent send-off to RVB. I've been watching Red vs. Blue for a really long time. I've been a fan like almost longer than I can remember, and it's always just been like something like really significant in my life. I feel like RVB is what taught me to appreciate good action, especially when Monty was animating way back when. And I also feel like it's one of the big reasons I appreciate character arcs so much, because each character gets such interesting arcs throughout the series, and even if they're like shorter arcs, they're much simpler and much more like defined. I'm really sad to see it go. I really love Red vs. Blue, and I always will, but you know, you can only have so much of a good thing. And honestly, I'm really glad we ended on Season 19 and not leaving Red vs. Blue 0 as the last bit of RVB content ever, because that would have been tragic. But if you're a Red vs. Blue fan and you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it a lot. I know Restoration came out a year ago, but for me, it like came out like 2 weeks ago. So I really wanted to talk about it, and I really wanted to give my thoughts and feelings on it. So to end this off, I'm going to leave you all with a prompt. Why are you here? Why are you here on this video? What made you click it? Why are you here? Why are you still listening to me right now? Is it because of some odd coincidence, or did you really have a plan to watch this entire video all the way through because you love Red vs. Blue that much? Please let me know down in the comments, and I'd really appreciate it if you would drop a like and sub on your way down there. And if you want to see more review stuff from me and you want to help support me do this, then definitely consider becoming a channel member. Not only do you get access to a whole bunch of exclusive rewards, but you also directly support me in the process. Also, once we hit 10 consecutive channel members, 10, big old 10, I'll start doing weekly member-only live streams where you, the members, get to decide what I suffer through. But that is going to do it for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, everyone.
That last part seemed really unnecessary.